Welcome to Babble Over Brews, deep thoughts fermented over time and text. I'm coming at you, Aaron Crew Juice for Verkin. I've got Gumby.
Hey, what's up?
I've got Zachariah.
Yo.
And I've got Brycen.
Hello.
We're going to be going over the Conjuring and the Warrens tonight to find out what is fact, what is fiction. Stay tuned. To start the night out, though, we're going to be doing Heavy Seas R.I.P. Current. R.I.P. Current is sure to be a fruity and refreshing favorite. Waves of raspberry and black currant blend together to give this beer its sweet and bright juiciness. R.I.P. Current is the perfect fruit ale for any time of the year. It has an ABV of 4.5, and it didn't list its IBU.
Sneaky.
Oh man, look at that. It has a really velvety overtone to it. That's pretty.
As tradition would hold, I take my first sip out of the can.
Ooh, look at all that. This thing is way heavy, like way heavy. This thing has enough to have its own mop top. But it has a very pleasant aroma. Almost flowery, to tell you the truth. Yeah, it's
flowery.
It's very fragrant. It's
Yeah.
very. I right from the get go, you can smell the currant. Not bad. So it has a slightly sweet overtone, but it's refreshing.
Very refreshing.
Definitely more of a ale / lagerish flavor, but I like it. It's good.
Very good for the summer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call it a rip current, but okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. It's not overly sweet, which is good because I don't usually favor overly sweet things unless it has a huge theme.
Yeah, for sure. And there's
So-
just enough body in it. Keep me
Absolutely.
hanging on.
Absolutely. We'll judge this against the other one later tonight. We'll find out which one is the winner.
Anybody else drinking tonight?
I've got the old classic Miller Lite.
Nice.
Yes. That thing's more American.
Right?
4th of July is coming up, guys.
That's right. That's
Stars and stripes.
right. How about you, Zach?
Not tonight, sadly.
No Rasputin?
What a
or
letdown.
Isn't that what you usually drink? Or
Yeah, that's usually what I drink.
My heart goes out to you.
Said
Well, we'll jump right into it. Brycen, who are you?
Well, philosophy geek, theology geek, Bible geek, and I've been an active paranormal researcher for about 15 years. And yeah, I guess I met you and Zechariah, about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago in the Naked Bible group
Sounds about right.
before
It's been that long.
before it turned into what it is today, back in the good old days.
Me back when they were doing research.
Yeah, everyone was doing research and everyone was halfway thinking rationally, and it hadn't been invaded by Art Bell fans.
Thank God the actual researchers split up into their own group now.
Oh, legit.
Yeah.
That was
That's
a good time.
he's also part of our research magi group. So
Oh, yep, nothing but the best.
It's like, is it really? That's like Freemason. It's really exclusive.
Yeah, talk about secret societies.
So going into that, just touching on the philosophy, where do you veer more? Who are your favorite philosophers?
Oh boy, I'm going to be convicted by association now. I am very interested in Slavoj Žižek and Elaine Badu.
I saw at least one of those coming.
Yeah, and a few others, and I'm a big fan of quite a few of them. But this is sort of, it's a pathway. So this is sort of where I've landed and where I focus my spare time that I can get. And yeah, really into that at that point, at this point, and yeah.
So most of our audience is not going to be familiar. Kind of background that thought process a little bit because every philosophical construct kind of has its
Yeah,
own ideologies.
they're a little bit complex, but to give, I guess the best thing I can say about them is that this sort of Zizekian Badu project is to sort of find a way to counteract postmodernism through universal experience.
Okay,
Hmm.
I like
And
that.
yeah, it's really refreshing, to be honest. And that's sort of their whole project. And I like Badu is very much into love as a universal experience that roots itself in the differences between people as opposed to their similarities. And then the universality comes in that experience of love. And Zizek's a lot the same way on that topic. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm interested in with those people.
I love it. I love it. So moving on, what's your favorite Conjuring movie? Conjuring universe movie.
I would say I think I like the original the best. I
Yeah.
think that's the one that we were talking about before the show about how it's much more focused on the ambiance and the build up and all that, because you don't, in that movie, you don't see anything real big happen till near the end. It's all sort of slow, and to me as an investigator, I mean, it's still exaggerated, but that movie kind of captures the essence of the subtlety and the strangeness of real investigations.
Okay.
And so that's probably my favorite one.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. The buildup is awesome.
It really is. We should probably background a little bit for our audience. So
Yeah.
I know that Ed Warren, for example, claims that he grew up in a haunted house, right?
Mhm.
And that there was a spirit lady that he would see. So that was
Yes.
kind of his background and how he started realizing that he could see things that others couldn't see.
Yeah. Yep. And that's, for most people that get into the paranormal stuff, that's a pretty common theme. It's the rarity is people that haven't had any prior experience getting into it, but there's a lot in that, where the quest for truth is generally brought on by having witnessed something and then not being believed.
Yeah.
So it kind of sets you off on this quest to find that truth, to finally be accepted and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't had any direct interactions with spirits per se. I've seen a few things, but no, like I haven't seen ghosts floating around or
Right.
demons tapping me on the shoulder or anything like that. So
Yeah. I've had some pretty interesting experiences for sure, but I was sort of in the rarity camp that I didn't have. I mean, maybe there's a few times when I was a kid that something weird happened, but nothing that I could tell was a direct influence. I was just sort of always fascinated pretty early on by just the whole idea that, I used to hear like adults talk kind of hush hush about weird stuff happening, and I could just right when I heard that, I was, what? Like, this is something I need to chase. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's sort of my background in it. And I've had some weird experiences, but I have theories about those weird experiences. And, I'm not sure it was demonic or not. At the time, I might have thought it was, but there's so many different variables in these experiences that that's sort of the nature of the beast, right? Is that once you think you get to a point where you understand it, then some other data will come through that will sort of turn your theory upside down.
yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to pin down, and that's what makes it interesting and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, I have one or two stories I'll share later on. Not yet.
Okay.
Well, hold off on those. And then Lorraine Warren was claimed to be a clairvoyant, right? So where she could actually more of an empath, right? Where she could feel things around.
Yeah.
Her, right? it's
Just like a conduit, huh?
yeah, yeah. Being empathic, she's more open to feeling what's around her and the essences around her. How far do you think her extent was in that?
I believe she calls herself like a light trance medium. And I believe what she means by that term is that she can feel and see things and sort of take on the experience to a degree, but not where like you're a full trance medium where you're sort of like basically taken over and you're a different thing for a while. Whereas Lorraine Warren, I think, would maintain her identity as a Lorraine Warren while getting the emotional, visual experience of whatever she claimed was there.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So, and of course, the two of them, let's see, got married. Yeah, got married in 1945. So they were together for a very long time.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, they started the institute, the NESPR, right?
Right.
Which is still in operation.
Yep. I think her
Is it
I
really?
think their nephew Tony Sparrow runs that now.
Yeah. In fact, in October, they're doing I don't know if you call it a conference or whatever. Where's it at? I think it's in Connecticut. They're doing a conference up there in
Yeah.
October. In October. So
Well, yeah, you're close enough just to go.
I could.
You should.
Was it 8 hours?
You're gonna have to go and then report back to me what you thought.
That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Just do a Bible over Brews trip up there.
Yeah, it would be cool.
I could try. My October is so booked right now. It's my brother's wedding, and then there's another Muay Thai. For those who don't know, I both train, fight Muay Thai, and I have another tournament coming up, hopefully in October. Just brought my student back. He didn't win, but he made it all the way through the fight. Lost to the champ, so that was good. And he lost. He lost to the champ.
A lot of people
And-
there.
And it was a 900-man Muay Thai tournament. Actually,
Wow.
closer to 950.
That's a win. I mean, that's a win for you.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was 900-man plus tournament.
Well, congrats to you. As
But,
well.
Yeah, no doubt.
My previous one, he actually took the title for his weight class. So yeah. So hopefully, going back, I have 3 more students that want to fight in the next one. So
Remind me never to pick a fight with you.
Yeah, no kidding.
it's just a fun sport. That's all. Just a fun sport.
You're too bad. Aaron's a beast, man.
Thank you, sir.
So, Brycen, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Was there any particular moment or some type of trigger that really led you, like, yeah, I'm going all the way, I'm going to research this and I need to find out more? Was there that moment ever for you? Or was it accumulative?
It was pretty early on. I mean, I was reading a lot of parapsychology books in the beginning, and I was pretty hooked pretty fast.
Okay.
And I've always been a big reader. So once I had sort of wrapped my head around the idea that people were experiencing stuff like that, kind of like people tell you that stuff's not real, and then behind closed doors there's whispers that, oh, this happened, we don't tell the kids, that kind of thing. I was pretty into it after that. And like I said, I was always a big reader, so I was just at the library, like anything I could find, paranormal, parapsychology, anything like that, I would just devour it. And one of the weird things about getting into this is you sort of have this like synchronicity stuff start happening, where now that you're studying it, people will start telling you stories about it, and then all these stories will start to surface, and then you're just led along, and before you know it, you're sneaking into graveyards with recorders and cameras and stuff to see if you can capture it.
Again,
I can relate to that.
corroborating stories that we'll get to in just a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just you're either going to be totally freaked out by it, or you're going to be like intrigued to the point where it becomes some kind of obsession.
Yes. And from what I understand, the Warrens actually wanted to make their living as artists, right? And then
Right.
so, which I actually haven't seen a lot of their artwork, so I don't know if it's more impressionist or.
Well, I don't think Ed was ever going to win an art competition.
Ouch.
So
Not even for the nun.
maybe for the nun. But if you look at his stuff, it's, I don't know what to call it, very basic. And I think I understand why he chose to be a ghost hunter as opposed to an artist. But yeah, that's
What I understand wasn't he drawing the haunted houses that he would later go
right. He would go around basically all over New England, as far as I know, and he would sit outside and start painting the house. And his wife, Lorraine, would go up and sort of charm the people into letting them come in. And they would just ask him about the haunting and whatnot. And I guess they would just write the stuff down. And eventually they come to a point where, through their Catholic faith and whatnot, that they would try to solve their mysteries.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of how I heard it too.
Yeah.
Their institute was actually founded in 1952, which is the same year my mother was born.
See this, the synchronicities are already starting up.
So one of the things that always baffled me, though, about the Warrens in all the movies was the relationship to the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Because they were not, and I'm not Catholic, by the way, but exorcists.
No.
Right? They were not official church exorcists. And those, I thought, were a very privileged, very privy, very secret group of people, right?
Well, and a lot of them still are.
Right. So I never understood the relationship and like how the Catholic Church would just be like, hey, we think you should do it, you should do it, and pretty much take the reins. So how much of that is Hollywood in the movies and how much of that is true?
Well, I know he didn't do any exorcisms. And over again, he insisted that he couldn't do exorcisms.
I'm pretty sure he did, though. Didn't he in the movies?
He did in the movie.
Now, here we go. Well, this is sort of where part of the mystery is that Ed Warren always claimed that he was officially recognized by the Vatican to investigate demonic cases. Now, as far as I can tell, I cannot find that backed up by anything. It appears, as is usual with the Warrens, that the only people really claiming this is the Warrens. Now, this is where it becomes like which is real and which is fantasy.
Right.
Because in the movie, which Lorraine Warren claims is accurate, at least to an extent, of course, things are exaggerated. All that's basically how it happened. But in the books, they'll make claims that they weren't actually licensed to do any of that. But I've also read things where Ed claimed that he had performed an exorcism before, but it was like hush hush. So what's real?
Yeah.
Good question.
But at the same time, on the flip side of that, there was never anything in the Catholic Church, like a disassociation from the Warrens. Was there anything official?
There's slight ones. There's if we get into the Devil in Connecticut case, the Devil Made Me Do It. How this works out is that the family experiences of, I forget where it actually happens in the case, but at some point their pastor tells them that they need to contact the Warrens in order to investigate their son being possessed and all this. And then what happens is they do go to the bishop, and he does authorize priests to go investigate. But the only real quote I can find from the priest, now let me see here if I can find it on here where I've written this down, is that, what is this guy's name? It's something hard to pronounce. It's like Francis Vilgaric or something. Well, the only real quote I can find from Francis Vilgaric is that his quote is, he could never tell if the Warrens were sincere but gullible, or they were just in it for the money. So the investigating priest on this case seems to be kind of throwing them under the bus.
Gotcha.
And part of it is that the Warrens claimed that the Catholic Church authorized the exorcism, but the Catholic Church denies that. And the bishop claims that there was never, the priests never deduced that they had to have an exorcism, that it was mental illness.
Ouch.
Okay. That's ouchie right there.
Yeah. See, it's just like, but
'Cause
then at the same
exorcists-
time, Arnie Johnson, the guy who killed the guy, was Arnie Johnson killed the Bono guy. And then he still claims to this day that he was possessed. So he's still backing up the Warren story. But Carl Glatzel and David Glatzel, who was the boy who's possessed in the movie, and his older brother, both claim that he was just mentally ill, and it was all a money-making scheme by the Warrens. So even within the family, you have two sides. So
Yeah.
the weeds thicken.
Yeah.
You know, which family member's telling the truth?
Yeah. That's interesting. What is it true that because I saw this claim that Lorraine Warren actually had her abilities tested by a university. Is that true or not?
Do you know what kind of tests they did?
I mean, it says as the Warrens began taking on bigger and bigger cases, skepticism about the couple grew. To quiet critics, Lorraine agreed to be tested by Dr. Thelma Moss, an actress turned psychologist and parapsychologist working in UCLA labs studying things like Kirlian photography. She found that Lorraine's clairvoyance was far above average, according to the demonologist in the book.
No
So-
idea.
So again, it's a claim in the book.
Right. Right. And here we go. You know, like I need to do more research on the person that claims that she passed the tests, and something tells me we're going to find that it was all good, but then Lorraine Warren didn't give her the money or something, and now she's anti Lorraine Warren. See, it's always like there's money involved,
Okay.
and everyone comes out trying to sue everybody.
They mentioned money, but is it true that they didn't charge for their?
They didn't charge for their investigations, but they're definitely making money off the books, and they're definitely making money off the deals. And I know that they lectured all the time.
Okay.
And you know, Amityville Horror was huge.
Yeah.
So
Still is.
you know, maybe they didn't make any money off the investigations, but you know, like some of the stuff that I found out being involved with I was never involved with the Warrens particularly, but I did have like mentorship from John Zaffis.
Okay.
Have you ever seen The Haunted Collector?
References to it, I didn't go in depth though.
Yeah, John Zaffis is their nephew, and he's just the nicest guy ever. And I never throw the guy under the bus. He was great to me when I was a young kid trying to do research and stuff. But even he had a problem with Lorraine Warren at one time. At one point in time, Lorraine Warren had on her website that she was warning Warren fans that there was people going around claiming to be trained by the Warrens that weren't really trained by the Warrens, including John Zaffis. And this is after Ed was basically, you know, incapacitated, so he could never like have a say in it. But basically, as soon as that happens, Lorraine Warren goes after everybody that was trained by Ed and starts saying stuff like they were, you know, we never investigated with them, we never trained them, we never had an association with them. I originally got in this whole web through a online radio show called the Lou Gentili Show.
Okay.
And his whole claim to fame was that he was trained by Ed Warren and he was a demonologist, et cetera, and they had this big thing called Amityville Horror Week one year, and George Lutz came out of the woodwork. He was on it, and he hadn't been heard from in years. And Lorraine Warren was on there, and he received a letter from Butch DeFeo, the original murderer in the Amityville case.
He's still alive.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. There's your evidence right there. Somehow that guy's still kicking. But they had that show on, and I remember they kept emphasizing this thing where they were going to reveal these deep, dark secrets about the Amityville case because it was the 20th anniversary or something, 50th, something like that, anniversary of Amityville. And this is where I started to first kind of be like, what? Like, what is that about? And there was some claim made on the show that he had agreed to speak about it because someone was going to pay him like 10 grand to talk about it. But he like sort of veiled it with, well, he thinks it's finally time for the truth to come out, and et cetera, et cetera. And I forgot where I was going with that, but you're gonna have to edit this part. I lost
Not a
my train
problem.
of thought.
We do it all the
We're
time.
all
It's
good.
okay.
All right.
That's why we do this.
Perfect. But yeah, I forgot what your original question was.
Oh, it was just related to Amityville and its reality and going back. So, question on that then. So, do you see Ed Warren as being the more honest investigator as opposed to his wife, Lorraine?
I feel like I do have this strange feeling that somehow Lorraine is the mastermind. And I say that because I feel like everybody that I personally interacted with, even if they thought they were charlatans, they always sort of had a respect for Ed, but they always came down to Lorraine was in it about the money. And it's kind of the bad part of it, because these people that I would talk to that actually investigated with the Warrens, their whole claim was that they would be investigating in like a sister group of the Warrens. And what they would do is they'd investigate the case, and then if they thought it was worthy, they'd send it to the Warrens. And essentially the first one, which I'm not going to reveal a name because the Warrenites are insane and they'll just go after these people if I reveal the name.
Okay.
But the lady I talked to, she was actually a social worker for a living, and she was doing a case for the Warrens. And essentially what her theory was is that this was all a mask for like sexual and drug abuse in the home. Okay. And essentially what happened is they presented this to the Warrens. Lorraine shows up, talks to the people for an hour, and she's like, demons. Why? Because she felt them there and she had a psychic link with them. And now the whole process of actually helping the family maybe uncover some criminal behavior going on has now been diverted. And the point is that it's demons now. And she got so fed up with it, she just left the group entirely and never did it anymore.
That's interesting.
Because, she just became a non-believer after she was in the mix of it and saw how they were doing investigations and all that. And then another guy I knew that investigated for the Warrens basically said the same thing, but it was that they had concluded that the investigation was a hoax, and they thought it was something to do with a child and he was having some kind of poltergeist activity. But the investigation, at least as far as they were concerned, revealed that it was just the kid messing with the parents.
Okay.
And so, but there was, I don't remember because it's been like years and years ago, but there was some kind of thing about a little creature that would like point at the boy and tell him he's going to die and all that, the typical. Yeah. And so they concluded it was a hoax, but they brought it to the Warrens and they were surprised to see that Lorraine Warren showed up and basically kicked them all out. And months later, they heard again about the case and how it was like this great demon infestation. And, and so it's just like that all the time.
Okay.
And
so
and
it's a pattern of this kind of, the investigators go in and like, no, there is something here, it's something else. And then Lorraine goes in and is like, aha,
there's a story, right? Like there's a story I can do and write a book about it.
So it sounds like when Ed was healthy, there was maybe more of a line to truth.
I feel like there was, and I still think it's sort of a money-making thing, but it seems like there's a divide between when Ed goes down. Before, I feel like the cases they're investigating, there is something there. There is weird activity going on that's legit, but then they blow it up and we're going to make a movie, we're going to do this. And then after Ed goes down, it just feels like they don't even care anymore. You know, like if the story's good, we're going to go in there and try to milk it for all it's worth.
We're going to touch on a few of those cases because that is really interesting. It's really
I
interesting.
thought their marriage
So-
was too good to be true throughout all the movies. I'm like,
Right?
nobody loves each other through all that crazy.
Oh my God, get a load of this. I think I sent this into the group at one point in time, but did you guys read the article about the woman that's come out and said that she was an underage paramour of Ed Warren? Yeah, supposedly. And now I don't know where the case has gone. I don't know if it was proven, disproven, or what.
That doesn't mean ghost lover, right?
This just means, yeah, we wish. Yeah, some woman, what's her name? Judy something, not Judy Warren, the daughter, but it's a different one. And she claims that she was basically adopted into the Warrens' household as a mistress of Ed Warren, and Lorraine Warren knew about it the whole time. And basically Lorraine's point of view was that they can't tarnish the perfect couple, Catholic couple image. So she was just going to be okay with it because, you know, she's still making money.
So what you're saying is they're like the Catholic version of Jerry Falwell.
I think.
Nice.
I think might
Nice.
be a really good comparison.
Had to throw the evangelicals under the bus there, Aaron. Thank you.
I'm just being fair. I'm just being fair.
Look, if I was the woman in that case, I'd be like, well, of course it's a demon, you know?
Right. Yeah. That's all you're missing from the Jerry Falwell case. Is like, well, actually, it was all brought on by a Ouija board.
Right. I need all these private jets.
Yeah. And I don't know where that has ever gone, if anybody's won any money or done anything with that. But I mean, again, it's just the same kind of stuff all the time. And, you know, at one point in time, I was a big Warrens fan, and I thought maybe this is like the devil fighting back and all this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't want to believe it.
Right.
Yeah.
Enemies coming against them, right?
And then eventually it just became so often that it was like, well, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me.
Ouch. So what you're saying is they would not be official assessors.
No. No. But that's what's so weird about it.
So yes. So
Okay.
an assessor is an actual position in the Catholic Church. And what an assessor does is they assess whether or not there is an actual demonic manifestation or possession or miracle, right? So they do various things. It's an actual position in the church.
Which I've always respected about the Catholic
Yeah.
Church is that there's a process.
Yeah, right.
Most claims are rejected.
Most are, yeah.
And so I've always appreciated about that. That's what makes this Ed and Lorraine Warren kind of interesting, because there's like, it still seems like there's a lot of gray area within the relationship. No official, like, those people are hosts. They
Right.
have nothing to do with the Catholic Church.
Yeah. And I do think there's a reason for that.
Mm.
Now, if you read the Warrens' books, they almost always use this guy named Bishop Robert Mckenna.
Mhm.
And if you do a little digging into Robert Mckenna, and to put this in a little bit of context, this is the 70s. So this is sort of like the wake of Vatican II.
Right.
And you also have like all the countercultural stuff going on in the 60s and 70s. And Robert Mckenna is a traditionalist Catholic priest. I guess he's a bishop. And he was Ash actually made a bishop by, what is his name? Well, it's like French, Michel Louis Gerard de la Rey. And if you look him up, he's actually excommunicated from the church because of his, traditionalist views. And
Ooh.
Robert Mckenna, you can find some writing from him, and he's very anti-Vatican II. Like everything that's going wrong with the world is Vatican II.
So at that point, would he be like a Sedevacanist?
I think it's the other one, the Sedeprivationist.
Oh, okay.
So they still acknowledge the Pope, but they think he's corrupt because of Vatican II.
Okay.
Either way, you can't trust the French.
Right. This is true.
So like I kind of googled it when you like mentioned it last time. It's like something like there is a pope, but he can't actually do anything until Vatican II is fixed or something.
So
Yes.
yeah. So
Wow.
like a Sedevacanist, for example, believes that the last great pope was Pope Pius the 12th, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Whereas the Sedeprovisionist, it's just corrupt until whenever.
Right.
So which is true as the non-Catholic. Which
Oh
is
no,
more
no,
true.
I love Pope Francis. I think he's awesome. I'm
I'm a big fan.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I love the guy. I think that he's doing more good than 90% of our leaders out there. Yeah, I think he's awesome. I mean, don't get me wrong, the media hates him because you can tell by the quotes, but I think he's great.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
But so now you've got this weird element to it where I think what the Warrens are doing when they're saying they have Catholic approval a lot of times is that it's through this branch, not through like the official Roman Catholic Church. And because you'll run into this constantly with the Warrens where they'll be like, for example, the demon murder case, the devil made me do it. They're claiming that there's like 6 priests there. They're all completely convinced the guy's possessed. But the officially sanctioned investigation, they're not even convinced in the slightest. So I have to sort of assume that there is some kind of almost ideological statement being made here. Because if you read the Warrens' books, there's a big theme about how hard it is to get an exorcism. But it's not always in a, oh, this is a good thing frame of mind. It's in, this terrible bureaucracy is preventing these people from getting help. And I really think that's sort of a big key of the puzzle where the church is in the gray area, is because some of them are for it and some of them are against it. It's almost like they feel the need to scare everyone and drive people back into traditional belief systems is a greater thing to do than telling the story 100% truthfully.
That's right.
Interesting.
Right. It's conversion by like a form of deception or something. And they seem to be okay with that, which I guess you could make an argument for that in some way, but
yeah. For our audience that doesn't know, the tradies, quote unquote, traditionalist Catholics are kind of like the Anabaptists of the evangelical world.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And so so I think with the church approval thing, I think they are getting church approval. It's just not what you'd regularly classify as church approval. It is.
I would say that, yeah, because I do not condone anything Falwell or any
So
of
it's kind of like
people like that would do.
it's kind of like an illicit approval rather than licit approval in some sense.
Right.
Mhm.
And I guess that's still legit, because I think even if you're an now I could be wrong, but I think if you're an excommunicated bishop, you can still bestow the bishopric on someone.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Apostolic succession stuff kind of still works. It's just illicit. So even if this bishop isn't going through exactly the same sort of proper channels, other things are still technically valid, but
Right. I think this is how the Anglicans can make arguments for apostolic succession, right?
Yeah, it's being out of communion. However, it doesn't mean that your apostolic historicity is negative.
Right.
So
Wow.
Yeah.
But for the non-Catholic, through The Conjuring and through Hollywood's filter on The Conjuring, do you feel like overall, I feel as the non-Catholic here, it's kind of pushed people like, hey, this is actually interesting what the Catholics do. Do you feel like it's hurt true Catholicism in a sense? Or do you feel like it brings that interest of people who are on the outside, like, hey, maybe you should look into this?
This is probably the justification for letting them get away with it.
So
Because
you
like
think
you
it's a
said,
negative?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I have to think it over for a
it,
while.
it,
but
it- it's almost a two-edged sword because it's like one of
Yeah,
those
okay.
where it's like, yeah, it does bring them in, but it may give them a slight false dichotomy of what is actually being done.
Like
So-
the non-believer in the Protestant side seeing Falwell thinking that's what Christianity is.
There is a slight, again, facade to it because there is a process inside the Catholic Church to guide you through these things, and these kind of make it look like you can get around that if you approach it the right way. So it's almost like a facade. So
Yeah.
Okay.
it's a two-edged sword because it does pique people's interest, but at the same time, it kind of might give them a false hope of what can be done outside of the church, but with the church.
it kind of reminds me. It kind of reminds me of sort of the backfire of conversion by the sword,
Yeah.
where you're going in and converting people, convert or die. But when you're converting or dying, like you're implanting rebellion. So,
Mhm.
In one way, it's like, okay, well, at least we got some people to convert, but that sort of anti-Catholicism has been planted, right? Because they're seeing it's like an invader, and this is like, conversion by deception. And if you're the type of person that is going to question things, like you're eventually just going to be like, well, I mean, all my faith is based on this giant lie, and you're going to associate that lie with the Catholic Church, not with the Warrens,
Just take my head off. But yeah,
Right.
I agree. A lot of people, when they feel that cold steel on their neck, oh, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, that's fascinating. Wow.
Well, let's take a real brief moment for our sponsors. We'll grab a second beer.
It's good stuff, Brycen.
Thank you. Bathroom
so
real quick.
far.
Okay. Wow. You see these, Zach? Can you see the can?
Yeah, from a distance. Of course, I've got the view. I had the view a little bit smaller, but yeah, I can see the can.
We'll say when you have to wear 2 layers during this heat, you make a lot.
All right, yeah. Oh, cool. That's a nice little design right there. I'm sold.
This is 4.7.
Is there kind of a?
That's about it.
I
Unless
believe
they
there
tell
can-
you more online.
I have a little more for us.
Okay.
I do have a little more for us.
Yeah, people are like so hush hush about their stuff lately.
And I've been noticing that unless you're on one of the companion sites, they've been neglecting the IBU.
I know. Why is that? Is that just the
I don't know. Good
alchemist thing?
It's true.
Right. Well, I know there were a few brewers around here who like left one company because they didn't like how things were going, or maybe they didn't get things their way and they went to another one.
Well, both of these are part of the Independent Brewers Association.
Awesome. Well, like even like Platform. Remember when we started out with Platform? Aren't they owned by Bud Light now or Budweiser? One of those.
Bud, yeah.
End of days.
All right.
I gotta use it.
Oh, go ahead. I like that one.
Oh, wow. What is it?
This one is from Stone Brewery. It's Buena Visa. So obviously it's embracing its
Yes.
de Los Muertos. Right?
Yes.
I think that's very Catholic. It's okay.
Hey, there you go.
We'll get the next. It says this is Stone Buena Vista Salt and Lime Lager. It's a lager was born here in Southern California, which is vibrantly influenced by our neighbors to the south. SoCal's warm weather lends itself to outdoor activities year-round, surfing our coast, snowboarding, biking in the mountains, off-roading, desert lands, or boating, fishing in our lakes and rivers. The Baja-inspired lager is the perfect companion.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got a great description.
I'm thirsty now, that's for sure.
Yeah. Next, we'll dive into the actual cases. We'll start with Annabelle first. Because, you know,
Okay.
why not?
I almost did no research on Annabelle, so it's be perfect.
Supposedly, it is one of the most bona fide cases.
Go ahead.
Yeah. All right, Gwen, you are.
Let's
All
go.
right, there you go. Coming at you now, we've got Stone Buena Vista. Stone Buena Vista Salt and Lime Lager was born in Southern California, which is vibrantly influenced by our neighbors to the south. SoCal's warm weather lends itself to outdoor activities year-round, from surfing on our coast to snowboarding and biking in the mountains, off-roading through deserted lands, or boating and fishing in our lakes and rivers. This Baja-inspired lager is the perfect companion. Brewed with just the right amount of lime and sea salt is everything a lager should be. Crisp, refreshing, and full of flavor. The name is pretty simple. We took Buena for good and Visa from Cerveza because we've always believed good beer is an important part of life. This is an ABV of 4.7. And by the way, both our beers tonight are part of the Independent Brewers Association.
Got no problem with that. Are you gonna post a picture of these cans on?
Oh, you know I.
Oh my gosh, you're so cool.
Those are
So-
some cool looking cans.
It is.
For anybody who can't see them, these are definitely inspired by Dia de los Muertos.
So cool.
So this one's not quite as heady. It is heady, but not quite as heady as that previous one. Very light flavor. It has a nice yellow ambiance when I look through it. Slightly hazy, not too bad. It has a very, very light aroma to it.
As Lopez tradition will hold. I take the first sip of it.
I can actually smell just a slight tinge of lemon peel.
I like that.
Oh wow, that's crisp. Like it's really crisp. This tastes like I just cracked something open sitting on a beach.
Yeah. Yeah. With Snoop Dogg by your side.
That's right. Yeah, that's good.
This tastes to me like how Corona should taste like, but you're always disappointed when you drink. At least I am.
That's so true.
Well, Corona's really only good if you've got a lime stuck in it. So.
Mhm.
Yeah. The fifth
Oh,
Corona is like
good.
the best Corona.
Well put. Although I will say it's a really good beer for those people who are gluten intolerant. So, word to the wise out there: if you have a gluten intolerance, that is your beer. So,
I didn't know that.
yeah. See,
See that people.
we are full of useless information. So, diving back into the Warrens, There is their cases. One, of course, is Annabelle. Her movies are quite famous.
Yeah.
So to jump in here, and I quote, in a locked glass box in the occult museum, there's a Raggedy Ann doll named Annabelle with a positively do not open warning sign on it. The doll may not look menacing, but of all items in the occult museum, that doll is what I'd most be frightened of, said Tony Sparrow, the Warren son-in-law. According to the Warrens report, a 28-year-old nurse who received the doll as a gift in 1968 noticed that it started to change. Then she and her roommates started finding parchment paper with written messages saying things like, "Help me, help us." As if it wasn't strange enough, the girls claimed that they didn't even have parchment paper in their house. Next, the doll started showing up in different rooms and leaking blood. Unsure of what to do, the two women turned to a medium who said the doll was being occupied by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins. That's when Ed and Lorraine Warren took an interest in the case and contacted the women. After evaluating the doll, they came to the immediate conclusion that the doll itself was not in fact possessed, but manipulated by an inhuman presence. According to the Warrens, Annabelle, the doll continued to move around their house on her own too. So they locked in the glass cabinet and sealed it with a binding prayer. But even now, visitors to the Warrens Museum say that Annabelle continues to cause mischief and may even look at revenge on her skeptics. One couple of non-believers reportedly got into a motorcycle accident soon after visiting the museum, with the survivors saying that they had been laughing about Annabelle just before.
Terrifying.
Where's George at?
Horror.
So thought process on that. What do you think?
I'm vaguely familiar with this case. It's been a while since I've read about it, but I guess my main question would be is, do we have any names of the people that experienced this? And if we ever asked them what they thought about it outside of the Warren's tale? Did you uncover any? I mean, you did some research on Annabelle.
So-
Did you uncover anything like that? Because
There was a priest involved, and unfortunately, I forgot to pull his name. There was a priest involved who supposedly picked the doll up, and this is actually in the Demonologist, the book by Ed Warren. Picked the doll up and said, "Annabelle, you have no power," and threw her back down. And then he later almost got killed in a car accident on the way home.
Yeah, don't they depict that in the movie?
Yeah, to an extent, they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So the doll itself isn't possessed.
It's a conduit.
It's a conduit to possess another person.
Well, ultimately, every malevolent spirit wants to possess a person. So I don't say demon because who knows, there could be things outside demons, but any malevolent spirit, their ultimate goal is to inhabit humans.
Okay.
So, what is your thoughts on conduits versus a possessed owl?
I would agree with, this is probably the thing about the Warrens, is that a lot of their sort of ideas on how things work, I do sort of agree with.
Okay.
And I would agree with them in the capacity that in this particular instance, it seems like, it's being manipulated by an outside force to appear as if it's possessed. I mean, that's kind of what I got from the story, at least what they've conveyed.
Right.
I'm not sure. And one of the things I find fascinating about the whole topic of, human effigies being possessed by something is this. I mean, this is totally in the Old Testament worldview, right? Like it's their whole concept of idols.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking about when I'm hearing this. I'm thinking,
Go.
there's this idea that you take this piece of statuary or object, and then you do a ritual to sort of get a deity or greater spirit to latch onto it, and it acts as sort of like a satellite of this being. It can see through its eyes or influence the immediate location around it.
Yeah, because
But yeah,
the idol itself is it's just material. It's the,
yeah,
it's the spirit that's called into it, which gives it its livelihood.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right. So to me, that, I mean, theoretically, if you take the Bible sort of ancient Near Eastern context seriously, that this is entirely possible. And I don't have a big problem with that. I think it's pretty likely.
Yeah.
Especially, if I remember the Warren stories correctly, it sort of almost starts out like they're giving too much attention to the doll.
Yes.
And they're sort of imagining that it's an actual person. And so, I mean, that's like a cultic setup perfectly. You have like an effigy, everyone thinks it's real, they're starting to talk to it, and then it sort of like starts to play the part.
So it's exactly how it's depicted inside the book, The Demonologist. That's the first thing he says is that you gave this thing way too much attention. He's like, you called this thing into existence, right? So, yeah.
And that really, I have one of my big topics that I like to think about and research within the ghost hunting thing is how much the investigators are influencing what's going on. Because time and again, part of my whole apparatus of how I like to study it was that I would investigate things on my own, and then I would investigate things with a group. And a lot of times when I investigated things by myself, I would experience things on occasion, but it was very rare. But as soon as you go into an environment where everyone like believes in it already, and everyone starts feeding off of each other, in my experience, that can actually produce phenomena.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where you might not have experienced anything before, but as soon as you have 5 people like, oh, the doll's alive, and it's, Uncle Jerry from 4 generations ago, and they all believe it's Uncle Jerry, like Uncle Jerry starts to appear or something.
Well, isn't that
Kind of like a Republican convention. I knew you'd get a kick out of there. I'm just joking. I'm not saying I'm left or right or anything.
You never know. There might be consequences though.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because isn't that exactly how the story of Neil Gaiman's American Gods is? Where
I
it's
think
like,
so.
Yeah, where it's like you have the old gods and then you have the new gods, but all of the gods are called forth because of the belief in what would be a god, and they have no power until the belief sets in, and then it manifests as a god.
Yeah, there's a now in parapsychology, you always got to wonder because it's scientific in a way, but I mean it's probably the closest to scientific research you can get within the paranormal field. But there's an old experiment they did, and I think it was in Canada.
Okay.
And it's called the Philip experiment. And essentially what they did is that they took a bunch of people and they put them around a table. I think they're playing Ouija board. They're doing table tifting and stuff. But what happened is that the experimenters create the narrative of the haunting and sort of seed it into the participants. And it's a completely made up story. So they invent some guy named Philip. They create a history, et cetera, and then the participants start to like conjure a spirit named Philip, and he's everything he's saying is coinciding with what the experimenters fed the participants. And like, what do you do with that information? Is that the participants creating the phenomena, or is that something acting like Philip, or
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because it does.
That's understanding how the group thinks
Yeah.
and being able to manipulate it. That's
Yeah,
Edward
and-
Bernays.
It's fascinating that it actually touches base with so much of what we understand in pop culture with the quote unquote new gods, right? The new gods came to be because we created them, right? And we believe in them, and our belief in them is what made them gods.
And as a
So,
group, we do believe in those, whether it's positive or in this case, Annabelle, negative. You know, I mean, pick any baseball team of your professional sport of your liking, right? You go
Yeah.
to the stadium and
Yeah.
everybody acts in accordance with one each other.
yeah,
It's just how. it
And
is.
you see the superstition in the players where they're,
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
So in this case, in Annabelle, why couldn't the opposite hold true? So I'm
absolutely.
asking.
Yeah, I know. I agree. So
Yeah.
moving over to the Perrin family.
okay. I did some research on this one.
Yeah, me too. And this one actually fascinates me. This one, and for those who don't know, the Perrin family would be your favorite one. So,
Yeah.
so go ahead. Background on the Perrin family.
Okay. Basically the parent family, I forget what they're in Rhode Island, I believe. And they live in this farmhouse. There is sort of this mythology in it about Bathsheba Sherman. And basically the entire haunting, not the entire haunting, but it grows into that, where Bathsheba Sherman is tormenting the family, and there's a myth about how she used to be this witch, and she murdered her infant with a knitting needle, and then went into the backyard and hung herself. And then this is the catalyst for the Conjuring and the stuff the family went through.
Yes. Now, what I did find out, so you can actually find Andrea Perrin's interview on YouTube, a modern one, where because she's the oldest daughter. Andrea Perrin is the oldest daughter. Her story is fascinating. She said James Wan, apparently she did work with him. She said James Wan, she said, God love him, he played it down. She said it was far more violent than what he depicts.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She said that he was aiming for a PG-13 rating, even though they wouldn't let him get away with it. And she said, so he actually toned everything down. It was actually far, far more violent. In fact, the first dog was not the one in the movie. The first dog was actually named Bathsheba.
Okay.
And she purposely did not put that in the book. She said, I didn't want to think that we were a bunch of dog killers. She said, I did not include it. She said, 5% of our story I left out of the book because it was so personal. I have no idea how people found out about the first dog. So it's kind of fascinating that somehow it leaked out, probably a publisher.
Yeah.
So, but she said that it was actually far more violent than what they show in the movie. She said what they showed in the movie was actually very, very tamed down. And she goes on to describe how the essence of this being would actually come and manifest itself to her. And it was not the witch that hung herself. It was actually a different woman, the one right after that. I forget her name. It's the one that owned the house right after the witch.
Oh,
She-
yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, she hung herself in the barn afterwards. The witch did. It was actually the story was it's the witch. It was actually
Okay. This
Yeah,
is interesting. I didn't know that.
yeah. But that being said, what influenced her to hang herself? So
Yeah. Yeah.
probably the
I
witch.
did
So
the research I did was really based around here we go again. The current owner of the house tried to sue the Perron family and Lorraine Warren, because basically after people put the pieces together and figured out where the house was. And so, people would go and bother them all the time and, vandalize their property and whatnot. And so she went on this rampage and tried to debunk the whole thing.
okay.
and you can find her video on YouTube, but the lady is not technically savvy at all. So she's doing great research, but the pictures don't line up in the video. And so you have to like stop the video and read it and then go back in the video to see why this piece of documentation correlates. Anyways, you
Okay.
can find this online and it's pretty interesting. And now what she is claiming is that, okay, in the book, Andrea Perron claims that Bathsheba Sherman was tried for witchcraft, and she went and all this, the whole history of this character. And what she's claiming is that there's zero evidence for any of it. There's no records in the court systems that she's ever been tried or she's ever been in court. The historian that Andrea Perron claims she got this information from claims that she never even discussed these things with Andrea Perron.
Okay.
And yeah, I couldn't find any records at the town hall or historical society. And then put together that I didn't write down the dates for some reason, but the date the Bathsheba Sherman would have been tried and have done this is before the town was ever even incorporated. So the documents are all in a different place. And I guess they went into it and looked at the documents. And let's see. Like Andrea claims that Bathsheba died by hanging herself. Well, what the documents they did find when they went to the other historical society is that she died of a stroke in her house. And that this kid that she supposedly sacrificed actually grew up and had kids and had their own farm.
Okay.
And what it appears to be, at least from what I can pull out of it, is that the Bathsheba Sherman mythology was still around. And so the locals all believed that she was a witch and all this kind of thing. And then, as per usual, Lorraine Warren goes in and claims that she had psychic visions and interactions with Bathsheba and that all the mythology was true. And so, here we go again. Like, who's telling the truth? But the fact is that everyone in the Perron family agrees with the haunting tale, but none of the facts line up.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of one of those weird things again, where it's like, it seems like the activity and the actual haunting is legitimate,
Right.
but all the facts around it are just sort of concocted and fit the mold.
Right.
And, what do you do with that?
Well, it kind of reminds me of the father inside Big Fish, right? And the witch in the village.
Right.
And the witch ends up being a regular kind of person.
Yeah, it really feels like that. Like it, and that's sort of my go-to with the Warrens, is that I think a lot of times the hauntings are, real,
Right.
or whatever, but they like amp up the mythology about it. And so it caused, if you do any kind of research into it, it just falls apart. But the family still generally will always agree that they went through something.
Mm-hmm.
So
it kind of sounds like Lorraine Warren just always builds up her own backstory.
right. It's like they go in there and they have no reason why any of it's happening. They're like, oh, here's a good story. We're just going to ply it on there. And they run with it. But,
So much for clairvoyance.
yeah.
That actually sounds a lot closer to what Andrea Perron was saying, because she had a really good interview. She really did. It's I think it was like guy.com on YouTube. So she has a really good interview. It's only like 20 some minutes long, but where she does go in and she says, no, these are legit. It was very violent. Although she doesn't, what she said is that the Warrens were not quite as involved as they claimed they were. But what she did say is that when the Warrens got there, the spirits became far more agitated and they got more violent. So there's that.
Yeah. And this is going to sound really bizarre, but when I was like knees deep in Warren World and I was investigating, this was a time period where I was experiencing weird stuff.
Ooh, let's hear it.
And it always kind of correlated with what I had sort of been indoctrinated by through the Warrens.
Okay.
Okay, and here's a good example. I went one time and I was knee deep in the Warren stuff, and a friend of mine and I went to this weird cemetery where I live, and I live in a town that is just weird stuff is going on all the time. And anyways, yeah, we went in there, and I remember we were just standing there, and I looked at my friend, and he had his flashlight, and he was like shaking. He was like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And I looked over, and I saw like a little black shadow thing like run off behind a tombstone. And and it freaked us out. But if you read the Warren stuff, they call this an imp, where it's like a little shadow creature that's supposed to, it's like the precursor. The first thing you start seeing in a demonic haunting is like little shadow creatures running off into the corner or something. So, and I've never seen that again, but I did see it when I was reading the Warrens books and, reading about imps, and it was all in my head. But, it was really bizarre that when I was in that mind state and all into the Warren stuff, that like that was the most active time I've ever had investigating stuff, because we would go out and we would see something strange like every time.
Wow.
And it was always sort of like stuff I would read in the Warrens books. But then when I got out of that, I would just, it was like a totally different style of activity.
Yeah, I've kind of had like this, especially with the sort of the biblical scholarship angle. Like when we're seeing people have visions, right? They're having visions with symbolism that they're sort of inculcated into, right?
Mhm.
Ezekiel is seeing stock Babylonian divine throne imagery, right? So it made me wonder a bit, is there something about certain supernatural experiences the mind is kind of actually trying to translate and impose its own layer onto it somehow?
Yeah, I think there's totally something to that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because it's becoming Catholic, and my kids and I, we like pray the rosary a lot together. I carry like holy water rosaries with me. I keep blessed salts in different areas.
Are you sure you don't work for the Warrens?
Right.
Okay.
Did you say salts?
So
Did you say salts?
yes, it's also great in a good Hispanic dish.
Nice. Nice. I won't question it now.
It feels so much better after rice and beans.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree.
I by the way, anybody who wants to come over and enjoy some rice and beans, I have like a good family recipe I created myself. It's
Oh, that sounds so good.
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So, but what's really interesting, and my wife kicked my butt for me telling you the story, but yeah, she will. If she ever listens to this episode, still totally will. So, my wife does not pray the rosary with us, right? And she often calls into question the validity of us always praying the rosary and holy water and stuff. Well, the kids and I have been completely at peace. We've been great. The other night, because I've been getting really deep into, because of episodes like this, this is actually like a 3-part episode. We have 2 more coming up after this too, later in the year. Doing the research for this, I've been researching really deep into things like demonology and stuff like that. And I always have in general, but even deeper for this. Well, my wife was sleeping on the couch the other night just because she often falls asleep watching TV and stuff. And so I just helped the kids go to bed, and I just left her alone. And then all of a sudden, she said around, I think she was like 4 in the morning. All of a sudden, she said she heard bang, bang, bang on the door, on the window, on the porch. It's a big bay window I have in front of my house. So she immediately jumped up, ran over, and opened the curtain. There's nothing there. And then she ran over to the side door, checked. All all around the porch. It would take a second for them to run off the porch because we have a fairly big porch on. Yeah. Nothing was there. She heard no footsteps, but she said she distinctly heard 3 big bangs. When she said
There
that,
you
I was
go.
like, yep. I was like, well, sweetheart, you're the only one not praying the rosary with us. And
I'm sorry. I should have rang the doorbell.
right.
I left my beer at your house.
It just seems to be that something's waking up, and because I will also anoint the children each night before we go to bed with holy water.
So wait, you're saying
So-
nobody else heard it?
Just her. She's the only one in the house that heard it,
Yeah, and you got that number 3 going on.
right?
Yeah.
Wait, what's that? Is it what's that mean?
According, now I don't know if this is a Warren thing or this is talked about a lot by previous demonologists, but the Warrens believed that demonic activity would occur in 3s, and it was some sort of blasphemy to the Trinity.
Yep.
And so that
Oh, interesting.
in demonic interference, it would always be like mocking of God in some capacity, in a way that it would, like, like when it does upside down crosses or that kind of thing, that the demonic manifests itself through sort of a reversal or mocking nature towards divine symbolism.
And I don't disagree. I mean, the symbolism always seems to reverse itself, right? I mean, it could have been 3 something in the morning. Who knows? I think that it probably hit her at 4 o'clock in the morning because that was, Brycen's time in CST. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just weird because there was a reference by, I think it was Father Literature. I believe it was Father Literature, who also called like 3 o'clock in the morning, like the witching hour, in reference to it being mocking of Jesus Christ and the Trinity. So,
Here's another interesting thing I heard once, and I might mess this up, but a nurse practitioner family member of mine said something about how 3 in the morning is one of the most common time for people to die.
oh wow.
Do with it what you will, but that's what I was told. But I thought that was interesting because it kind of goes with the whole mythology.
Oh yeah. So diving into Amityville, probably one of the most famous cases of all. So Brycen, I'll let you background it real quick.
I think we talked about this earlier, but I'll start in with the Amityville Horror Week by Lou Gentili. And this case is so the weeds are in the top level they could be in on this, right? And it's so absurd at this point that people are still arguing about this case today. There's message boards dedicated to it. There's new information that comes out. I don't know why they do this, but every 15 years there's like some new clue that's let out. But George Lutz, this is what I was told anyway, and you can actually find some validation for this now. There's a documentary, I think it's on Amazon, but it's called My Amityville Horror.
Yeah,
And the one of the kids, Chris Lutz, has finally come out and revealed his story. If you read the Warrens' account, George Lutz is just an average family man, and he's just trying to make a living, and he's moved into this new house and whatnot. But if you watch that documentary, Chris Lutz claims that his dad was obsessed with the occult and that they were all terrified of him as children because they thought he could move things with his mind. There's that. And back when I was communicating with Lou Gentili, him and George Lutz have like this falling out. And so they're constantly after each other. And one of the things that Lou would always say about George Lutz is there's things about George Lutz people don't know, but you can do your own research to figure out what that is, and et cetera, et cetera. And I believe what Chris Lutz is presenting in the My Amityville documentary is what Lou's referencing. is that George Lutz wasn't just some guy that was trying to raise his family, but he might actually be the reason that the house was haunted to begin with.
Interesting.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And for years I just never really took it anywhere, but then that documentary came out and it's like, well, there it is, it's coming out. And yeah, I just think there's so much going on in that. I mean, still there's so much going on with this that people just, there's no way to figure it out. And I mean, Jay Anson, I believe, came out and said that most of the book is not true. And I think it's either George Lutz's attorney or the Warrens' attorney came out in one of the court battles and said that, yeah, they basically cooked up the story over a bottle of wine. And, but again, it, like, if you listen to it, some of it sounds legitimate. So again, it sounds like one of these ordeals where they went in there, something was occurring, and then they're like, well, we could really blow this up.
Well, I mean, there was a murder.
Yeah, true.
And that is hard to argue. I mean,
Yeah.
when there's people die.
Yeah. Well, and so, and to touch on that, the interesting part about this is, to this day, again, so this one I was listening to, like, it's been Investigators,
Mhm.
and it's with people involved. It's, how do you explain the fact that none of the neighbors heard the shotguns going?
Yeah, it's weird.
It's because they estimated it must have been, what, 9 shots that were shot.
Right.
And so and that's allowed. I don't know how many of our guests and our listeners have ever heard a shotgun. They're loud, like incredibly loud. And then the one they were using, they said this one you can hear in a 5-block radius. Yeah. So if this is a very loud shotgun, and here's the thing, nobody moved. Like, after doing the investigation, they went through and they found out that nobody moved. They were all sleeping. So if nobody moved in their bed, one of 2 things is true. Somebody was either holding them down in their bed, and you would
second killer theory. Yeah, I've read this. Yeah,
but you would need more than one, right? Because if you have that many people, you need more than one killer. You need several killers to hold them all down. Or B, something else happened, because again, you have multiple neighbors that live around the house, and none of them heard the shotgun. And after ballistics, they said they were shot in their beds.
Yeah.
How?
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing about Amityville, is that I think the haunting story of the Lutzes is not nearly as interesting as the actual murder.
Yes.
Is because the Lutzes, it's like, okay, we can, like, it's all made up, they made it up, blah blah blah. But the murder, there's legitimate mysteries in there that no one can really figure out. And I'm pretty sure DeFeo claimed that he was possessed during it, right?
He does.
Yeah, he claimed that he was hearing the voices and all that. And to me, that's where the real interesting mysteries are, is in the murders, not the 28 days later and then they fled because the walls were bleeding or whatever.
Right. I was watching a more modern interview of him. He still looks possessed.
Yeah, he's nuts, man. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely.
Yeah, there's something wrong with that guy.
Well, I have to confess that I tried to watch a more modern version with Ryan Reynolds in it.
Well, that one's a bit more fictitious, but
I don't even know. I definitely not an expert on that subject at all. I couldn't even get past the murder scene. I'm like, I don't want to watch it.
It's gruesome,
but not because of the supernatural element, just because of, like he was saying, the murder element is like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Man, that's
and again,
that's enough.
How? Because there's no silencers built for that shotgun, right? So how?
Well, when did it occur? What month? Like, if it occurred right now in July in Cleveland, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between gunshots and fireworks.
That was 68, right?
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't know. All I remember is that I feel like isn't there like a storm going on or something like that where I think I don't know. I feel like there's something to do with like there's a storm coming through or something, and then no one heard the storm either, or one of the reasons they think they didn't hear it was because of the storm or something like that. So it would have to be a certain time of year.
Yeah. Even then, though, if anybody who has shot a shotgun, there's a distinctive difference between hearing thunder and a shotgun.
Oh yeah, there's like a more clap to it.
Yeah, especially 9. I mean, you're not talking about one shot.
That's true.
I just shot a shotgun this past weekend. We were, skeet shooting, right?
Oh yeah,
But there is a difference between where you shoot a shotgun.
that's true.
Like we were out in open acres, hundreds of wide open acres.
Yeah.
There's a difference between shooting it there and shooting it in a suburban neighborhood.
Exactly.
So context does make a difference there. I'm not saying that I would be able to tell or not be able to tell. I'm not really sure, honestly.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in the city here, I hear things. I'm like, oh, that could be this or that. But I'm going to just keep watching my show and keep going on.
I'll put it to you this way. I know the difference between, say, fireworks and a gun. And when I hear a specific sound in the distance, I do unlock my revolver and put it pretty close to me. Just say it. Just say it. Yeah, I have a revolver. Get over it.
Yeah,
So,
no, I too find it hard to believe that no one could hear a shotgun next door. I'm on board with that.
Yeah, just totally strange. And I forget what else, because then they have there's like this whole theory that the sister helped him do it. Have you ever read about that?
No, I've heard the second accomplice theory.
Right. And I think the part of the second accomplice theory is that one of the sisters helped him do it, and they had some weird relationship. And I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've gotten into it, but Amityville Horror, there's just piles and piles of weeds that you got to go through to try to figure anything out, and you're going to come up at the end just like, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, there's just too many loose threads.
Yeah, it's true. By the time Hollywood gets her hands on it.
Yeah. But that's okay, because that rolls us around to Enfield.
Okay.
So I don't know how much you have on this one. This one's really interesting too.
Yeah, the Enfield poltergeist case as a whole is super interesting. I'm not so sure about the Warrens' participation,
I
but
didn't even hear about the participation, to be honest.
well, that's part of the thing I had written down, is that I was aware of the Enfield poltergeist before I ever got into the Warrens, and was shocked to hear that supposedly the Warrens were involved.
Right.
And then the more I read about it, it feels like they just went over there for a day and like interviewed the person, and then kind of got ran out by the Society for Psychical Research. And then
that's all I heard. Because it was actually Maurice. Maurice was actually the one. Maurice Moss, I think, right?
Gross, I believe.
Oh, Gross. You're right. Gross. Moss was a different investigation. Gross. He did everything. He was there for 14 months.
Yes.
So I mean, and he has his recordings to this day. You can catch them on YouTube. His recordings to this day are fantastic evidence that something else was going on.
When I first heard those recordings, I was told that they were from the Warrens.
No.
Yeah, not true.
Nope.
Not true. Yeah.
Nope.
I remember, Lou Gentili on his show played him one time. And I was like, oh my God, I finally heard him, because, this is like early internet days, and you just can't find the stuff. And I'd always known that they were real, or they existed, the recordings. And I heard them. And then I was told that they were from the Warrens investigation. Not true.
Nope.
And, like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
But if you read their book, they make it sound like they were very involved, and
there was the BBC actually is funny. They pulled in the one daughter and the Hutchinson's daughter. I forget the name of the lieutenant. So they pulled him onto the show, the actual lieutenant who was on site, and a skeptic, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And the skeptic had the weakest freaking argument. It was terrible. She comes on, she said, well, there's other investigations that were done and this and that. But she doesn't go very deep into the investigations. And she sounds about as credible as the Warrens on this.
Yeah.
So- but then the investigator is like, listen, I am an actual former police investigator. I was there on site. I witnessed these things. These are the recordings. These are like, how are you telling me that I didn't see what I saw? I mean, so it was very well, put together, and his testimony is very well done. I will say that the daughter to this day looks like she's still haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's you see it in her face. She's definitely
sure.
still, yeah. It's terrifying. It's terrifying to see because to this day you could see the terror in her face. Yeah, lovely girl, lovely British girl, but you could see the terror in her face.
Well, and this is part of the thing about the infield poltergeist, plus the fact that the Warrens were barely involved, is there's like tons of witnesses. And they've all come out and given their version of the story. And, that's one thing you don't ever find in a Warren case is all these witnesses that are telling their story. Because in Warrens, it's always like, we got to keep them secret because whatever.
Right.
But, the infield poltergeist is a super interesting case. And a lot of times people are like, well, it's a hoax because they show that the girls are faking stuff. But if you really like get into it, it really looks like the phenomena is real, and then sometimes the kids will fake stuff because there's like reporters around and they're being like forced into performing or whatever.
Kids get into stuff.
And to me that's perfectly logical.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make, but as per usual.
Kids are kids. They're like, let me look, this is the stuff that's happening. It's like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that most of the investigators that really investigate it were all completely convinced that at least some of the stuff was real.
It was fantastic. So one of the constables that first showed up during the first call-ins, she was there. There's two of them on site. And she corroborated the fact that she walked in and she told them directly to their face they were full of it. And then before she walked out, all of a sudden a chair lifted up 1 inch off the ground, moved 4 feet over and set itself back down. And she said, I know you're pranking me. She walked over, walked around the chair, picked it up, and couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
So she corroborated the fact that she could not figure out how it happened. And then here's what's really interesting about the Enfield poltergeist. It's again, just all these different people. There was two people completely unrelated to the case. One was a postal worker, whatever you call them in England. But
Yeah.
One was a postal worker that had just dropped off something to the flat next to them. And he was walking back across the street and stopped and looked up and saw the daughter floating across her room, toys next to her floating across the room. And then the person, the worker next to him also saw it. And they both called in at the same time as corroborating eyewitnesses, completely unrelated to the case, who didn't know anybody. So the fact that they are completely unrelated to the case, knows nobody in the case, didn't talk to the police, but both of them eyewitnesses in the same day, so the same thing, and called it in. That's something.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So there's enough there that there's something.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So Brycen, do you feel that way overall? Take the Warrens out of the picture. They're off the table. Is there enough stuff there outside of the Warrens, research or work, or any influence of the Warrens that yes?
In infield, yes, I do think so. I think Maurice Gross, and there's another guy that I think he's like writing stuff down. It's like Playfair or something is his last name. Their investigation is really well done. And like you can read their investigation and almost get bored with like the details that they're providing, because it's done like a real investigation, right? They're trying to debunk it. They're also provoking and communicating with it. They're trying to set up traps for the people in the house to fall under. And I mean, it seems legit to me. So I think the infield poltergeist is real. And I think eventually, I don't remember exactly what it is, but at some point they catch the kids faking stuff. But this is pretty normal if you read about poltergeist cases, that there's like a timeline to the whole thing where it kind of like goes, increases, and then it drops off. And usually the fakery starts to happen when it's dropping off. And I think by that time, you know, you've got 10 people from the university watching you under surveillance 24 hours a day. And they're like, well, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And eventually, being children, they're going to just start doing stuff. And I really, I think infield's legitimate.
Yeah, I agree. There's enough, and again, so for those who don't know my background, I have to agree that there's things that happen. My first house I owned was literally a quote unquote haunted house. Whenever I was on site, nothing manifested itself. But my ex, her uncle, and my sister all said that whenever I was not in the house, people would walk around upstairs and slam doors. And they always said whenever I arrived, everything would stop. And I'm pretty sure it's because they don't like my cologne.
Ah,
But
I didn't want to talk to you about that.
well, afterwards, please. Afterwards, it's nice, Hetty Musk. So, and my first ex would actually experience stuff like that with her ex before her and I got together. She has a ton of weird stories. But I know 4 people. Here's the weird thing. I don't think I ever told you guys this. I know 4 people that have experienced, I don't know, what you call it, night terrors.
Mm-hmm.
But these night terrors go maybe a step beyond what you think of night terrors. Yes, they get sleep paralysis, right? That's why sooner or later we're going to do an episode of this. I know one that has talked to his terror and asked him who he was. Zechariah, you're going to love this. So his terror looked directly at him as he was pressing down on his chest and trying to choke him out, and he told me he was a watcher. And he didn't know what a watcher was, because later when he and I were training at Muay Thai camp, he's a Muay Thai guy. I was talking to him at the camp about that, and I saw his eyes perk up. And then later he reached out to me and told me the story. He's like, you need to tell me more about this stuff, because this thing has been visiting me first in my dreams, and now sometimes he's in my room. And at one point he was holding my chest down, and he calls himself a watcher. So he didn't know that before. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating. I know another person that experienced the same thing. He didn't call himself a watcher, but he did the identical same description. And he was fighting it, and to this day it left a scar on his body.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And get this, this might trip you out a little bit. One of my old 4-H advisors when I was really young, this is way before I ever knew what a watcher was. Okay. So she was talking to my mother, my strange mother, I should say. And she would tell her that this angel would come to see her, and this angel called itself a watcher, and it wanted salvation, and it was trying to figure out if it could help get this human to find salvation for it.
Interesting.
And she would have long conversations, apparently sit for hours at a time, trying to figure out if this human could help it find salvation.
What do you feel like that? Feel about that? Because this is pretty like a theologically dividing idea. You know, like, I don't know if I want to name drop this guy or not, but you can edit it out if you don't like it. You guys remember Tom Ragsdale?
Oh no.
Who doesn't know Tom Ragsdale?
I had to interact with him on like a different forum for like a while. So that was an experience.
Yeah, and he was just gung-ho about this idea.
Yes.
you know where we are theologically, and I still think that guy was nuts.
Yeah. I'll never forget. I'll never
Fill me
forget
in.
one time he was on this kick about basically Tom Ragsdale was a Heiserite and he was all into Mike Heiser, but he disagreed with him on one key point.
Mhm.
And it was that watchers or fallen angels or whatever could achieve salvation. And I'm not necessarily against that idea, but his methodology is all bizarre. But I'll never forget when he was saying, like, I was like, so how are you going to do this? Right? Like, you're going to go preach the gospel to the fallen angels. How are you going to do this? And he said something like, well, a fallen angel can take any form that it wants. And like, if it turns into a fly, I just need to preach the gospel to the fly, potentially being a fallen angel. And I was just like, wow, man, like I was almost buying it for a while. And then like, you know, once we figured out the praxis of this whole thing, it really fell quick for me.
See, like, so what you're saying is Jeff Goldblum is who we need to minister to.
Apparently.
I'm gonna drink whatever he drinks.
But it's kind of interesting because I believe, didn't Fern and Audrey make a reference to this same kind of spiritual encounter where they said something about
Yes,
they would have demonic encounters with entities that were in their heads feigning guilt, and that this was sort of the catalyst for them delving deeper into whatever. But
yes,
yeah, so
on Heiser's podcast, they did.
yes,
They made a
yeah.
reference to them finding out they're watchers and that they had to command them by name as a watcher to deal with them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's kind of interesting you tell that story because it's sort of the same narrative, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to say they're wrong because so I've actually had correspondence with Ferdinand.
Okay.
And I honestly, I'm not going to say they're wrong. They're very well meaning, and they very well may be onto something. And I think they're having actual correspondence with things on the other side, and they are actually dealing with things on this side. So I
Yeah.
don't think, unlike the Warrens, I don't think they're faking it. I think not only are they well intentioned, I think they are on to some form of combat or engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and they're very well intentioned. They reach out to me after I had correspondence with Dr. Heiser on this. I did go all the way back to one of the Q&As on this subject when he mentions Aaron. That's actually that was from me. So
Yeah.
and because of my past engagements with my parental unit
Yeah.
and the things that I dealt with on that, because I've lightly touched on my background. I'm not going to do it now. It could be a whole 2 podcasts by itself. But I made references to it. For references to it, go back to our Christmas conversion story in the last on our last podcast. This last Christmas, I made references to things I've been through. I'm not going to deal with it here, but after they found out my story and the things I've been through, they did reach out to me so earnestly. So I do think they're very well intentioned, and I do think they're on to things. So yeah, to the benefit.
Yeah, I really like their methodology. I've gotten into like psychoanalysis and trauma a lot, and I like their methodology.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how on point they are with all this stuff, but
Yeah,
I do think a lot of stuff like that can be rooted in like trauma and
Sure. Yeah.
psyche fracture
Open
and
doors.
all that kind of. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I was on site for our audience who may have heard otherwise. I was on site when they received some criticism while Dr. Heiser was in the room himself. From my correspondence, I don't think their criticism was justified. So just so for those who are out there, because there was references to like financial stuff, and from my interactions with them, I feel that was unjustified. So
Mm.
because
Interesting.
I will tell you that Ferdinand Audrey never asked me for a dime. So they
Yeah.
offered to counsel me free of charge. There was nothing like that. So from my correspondence with Ferdinand Audrey, they're 100% legit. They're 100% well-meaning, and I think they're on to good things.
So this is what makes it interesting and tough for me in terms of the supernatural, whether or not a person's claim to something is true or not.
Right.
You know, and I'm on board with you, Bryson, in terms of there could be open doors in terms of people who have had the worst past ever, maybe a fractured past, abuse in any way you want to call it. There could be an open door there. And so, you know, I would say that I probably fell into that camp of, yeah, according to your background, you should have an open door to something supernatural or not, right? And
Mhm.
I grew up evangelical Pentecostal, so that, you know, that makes me in that camp much more, right? But my whole life, experiencing everyone around me who's had supernatural experiences, I could never have.
Right.
And so, but it didn't diminish me wanting to search that out. I always felt like I wasn't privileged enough, or I wasn't just in that camp to
Yeah.
experience something like that. And so the only thing that I had close was indirectly, and this was it. I'll wrap it up really quick. You know, when I first got married, I lived in an apartment. This apartment lived in a very old colonial home. It had a servants' quarters where the slaves lived. We lived in that part of the home.
Okay.
We loved it. They renovated. It was an amazing home. It was where my wife and I first lived. We loved it. It was an amazing place for us. Nothing but great memories there. One experience there, or maybe two, but one for sure, we left. Our landlords, which was our neighbors, they lived in the same part of the home, but in a different area. We were gone. They called when we were gone, and they left this frantic message when we were gone. And we got back, we were, you know, at this time we had answering machines, a
Whoa.
little, you know, a little device just dedicated to that. I pushed a button and I get this crazy message from my landlord right next door. Great friends of ours to this day. Hey, you guys, I thought you guys left. I saw you guys left. The craziest noise ever. We were sitting in our dining room, which was right next to our kitchen where we, you know, in their home. She said, I swear to God, like a truck was coming through from your kitchen right into our dining room when we were having dinner. And it jolted all of them. She's like, now I know you're not home, and that's why we're leaving a message. And so, you know, her husband, John, went to check things out. There's nothing here.
Yeah.
And so she said she literally heard things fall within the walls, that kind of thing. So, you know, we got home, we checked the message, and we're like, what the heck? We're looking like in our kitchen where you're like, everything is fine. How could that be, you know, possible? But that was the closest thing I've ever felt where something manifested itself, but yet I wasn't privileged to it. And I always felt like, man,
If you were only there.
yeah, well, like,
Right.
why are some people so privileged to something so supernatural and some people aren't? You know, is it self-awareness? Am I not that far along on the salvation path? Am I on the wrong journey? You know, what sets it apart? Go ahead, Zach.
I'm kind of with you on this. Like, I have had zero direct spiritual experience. There's something I experienced, but it's kind of different. I'll talk to it about after the show. But yeah, if I could, I think I described it before. I have like the spiritual awareness of a rock. It's like, is there such a thing as like an anti-psychic or something?
So the closest I think I ever got to that is I actually helped with an exorcism. This is so this is way back when I first left after go back to the Christmas episode. Now I escaped family
So you had to be Catholic.
family abuse. No, I was actually evangelical at the time.
And you helped with
I was at a Pentecostal church at the time. Well, it was non-denominational.
Oh, okay. So anything else coming?
Yes. And during one of the pastors, so for those who haven't listened to the episode, I escaped under my mother who was abusing us, and I ran to a pastor's home, and I lived with that pastor for a while. He was a non-denominational pastor. His inclinations were Pentecostal, but he was not opposed to Baptist Jews. So, living with that pastor, God bless his soul, very nice guy. And so actually, his whole family, very nice people. I got to experience something one night when he was preaching. All of a sudden, somebody in the congregation, a friend of his daughter's, jumped up and started convulsing and foaming at the mouth. And I was dumbfounded. I'd never seen anything like it before, right? And he started confessing to being on the beaches of Geneva, which I didn't quite understand.
Yeah.
And then, well, there's more to it. So we jumped down and started praying over him, praying over, and he twisted back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, until his body started relaxing and he started calming down. And the pastor acted kind of weird because he had prayed for him, but then he walked out. I was like, well, that's weird. You would have thought that with this being a obvious exorcism, you would have thought that the pastor would have stayed on site, right? So he prayed over him, and as soon as he relaxed, he just walked out. And so I confronted him. I actually walked over to him and I said, well, what's going on? I said, obviously, you just exorcised that guy. And he's like, well, here's the thing. He goes out to the beaches of Geneva. That's where the Satanists meet and hold their meetings and their coven meetings. And the trouble is that when he first started going there, it wasn't this violent. And every time he goes back, it becomes more and more violent because every time 7 more demons are going to accompany him. And every time he comes back, it's going to be more violent.
Right.
And it was fascinating to watch that. I mean, I would like to say fascinating to participate in that, but it was more awestruck than anything.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that he had that awareness of him, that the reason why this one was more violent was because more demons were surrounding him this time. And he's like the trouble is that if he keeps doing this, there will be a time when we cannot exercise him.
Interesting.
So
maybe in my neighbor's case, they were the ones that could have been haunted by demons, or
I don't know. This is a guy who involved himself purposely with satanic meetings and satanic covens. So he was inviting demons into himself. So that's the closest I ever got. But let me tell you what, witnessing it firsthand, what you see in the movies, that's what it looks like. Convulsing and spewing all kinds of, I mean, everything you hear coming out people's mouths in the movies, that's what he was saying. I mean, every kind of expletive in every kind of way, and every kind of it was bad. It was violent. It was vile. It was everything you see is what he was going through. Yeah. I mean, it was bad. His head did not turn the full 360.
Crap.
Right? So obviously it wasn't that far.
Well, guys, I'm probably gonna have to wrap it up here pretty quick.
That's okay.
It was awesome. It was fun.
I think we're wrapping up right now. That's why I was kind of leaving you with that story.
Okay.
On the beers. Gumby, what was your favorite?
Definitely
the Buena Vista. Okay, Buena Vista. I also enjoyed the Buena Vista. I did thoroughly enjoy the RIP Current. I thought it was really good. Great dessert beer, phenomenally well accented. Good, great summer beer actually. But this one, I will agree, the fresh crispness, I think, put it just an edge ahead.
This one was very consistent. Stayed solid.
Yeah.
I like it.
So nothing against the other one. I really do think it was phenomenal. I would drink it any day of the week, twice on a Sunday.
I don't know if I'd stock it personally.
Yeah.
This one I'd stock.
This one it edges it out. for some reason it just edges it out. I think it's the crispness on top of it. Probably the lime. I love lime. So anyway, last words. Zachariah.
It was pretty fun experience. Drama, horror. all you can-
Brycen.
Yeah, I had a great time. I guess my end mark will be like something like referencing Gumby's sort of deal about why doesn't he experience things, and I think a lot of my personal experiences were provoked by me being obsessed and pursuing it.
Okay.
So I guess the moral of the story is be careful what you look for, because you might find it.
Good advice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Gumby.
Yeah, I definitely agree and concur with that. Sometimes you may not realize what maybe God's protection over you,
Yeah.
and just accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with that. And there's nothing taboo over Brews.
That's right. Please feel free to find us on every social media platform. Facebook. In fact, I just upgraded our Facebook platform to the new Facebook version. So
Yeah, that's
please
awesome.
check that out. And we will be doing live green room editions coming up where our audience can engage. Should be especially good on Skeptics Corners. All right. And please feel free to participate in paying for our beers, because we do this for you. This is only for you. We drink.
We don't do it for us.
No, it is solely for the audience. It's solely for your
It
benefit.
doesn't matter what I think.
That's
Purely
right.
altruistic.
So please feel free to donate on Patreon or on anchor.fm/Bible Over Brews. We are here for you. Please reach out to us. Love you. Good night. Godspeed. Peace out. All right, guys.